What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to be going over this week's community gaming tournament. We're also going to look at the balance changes coming from the OTA that just dropped, and we're going to take a look at the #1 deck on the Marvel Snap Global Leaderboard. But first, let's take a look at the #1 deck from this week's tournament, which was Darkhawk. I'm covering up the namesake card behind me, but everybody knows Darkhawk at this point, especially after these past few weeks. Because of RSM, Darkhawk has firmly planted itself once again in the Marvel Snap metagame. This time in a Ravonna Renslayer list. The main synergy here is that Ravonna makes Mystique cost 1 less, which is like the best card that you can pair if Darkhawk is doing good things for you. So obviously this deck is good to prey on all of the RSM lists that are out, but it also does a pretty reasonable job preying on all of the Loki decks, because Darkhawk decks employ specific synergies. So there's a few things here that are making this deck good against Loki. One is the synergies, like I said, Rock Slide plus Korg, Darkhawk, Mystique, Renslayer, Iron Man. All of these cards being synergistic with each other makes it a little bit more tricky for a Loki deck to capitalize on your cards. But there's one other thing going on. Thena and, to a lesser extent, Angela are much worse when Loki steals them. Specifically Thena, after each turn, Thena getting a trigger, Loki decks just aren't going to have as much time to activate Thena, and once they get Thena, they're going to be dumping a whole bunch of cards at once. They might not think to play around Angela to set up for it, though this was an open deck list tournament, so Angela is a little bit worse against Loki, and same thing with Sage, though there's only so much that people can plan around if they don't know they're going to be getting those cards. And then also having priority does make Juggernaut better. So all of these are really good tools against Loki, and we're going to see Loki. I mean, we saw last week it was 12 of the decks in the top 16, so King Firm definitely came to game here against Loki. And we're going to see there was a lot of Loki again in this tournament. In second place, we had Imi with Phoenix Force, which is now just like very solidly a Loki deck at this point in the game. We see it here with Cable and Agent Coulson, and then Snowguard as well, and then Living Tribunal at the top of the curve, the rest of it being a pretty straightforward Phoenix Force list. We're going to take a look at another Phoenix Force list in just a moment, which is why I'm kind of getting through this. In third place, we have Devinter with Devil Dino Loki. This saw, I think there were 2 Devil Dinosaurs in last week's event, and both Devil Dinosaur Loki, non-RSM Loki lists did very, very well. I believe we're going to see about 10 Devil Dinosaur lists in this event, and there were only 43 players in this event. So a lot of players getting on the Devil Dinosaur train. I talked a lot about last week why playing traditional Loki is really good against RSM Loki, because you are getting that higher concentration of powerful cards. You're stealing their Darkhawk, you're stealing their interaction. We also see Mobius now making its way back into all of these lists, and Cosmo. A lot more hate going on. And then Mystique to copy Mobius, Cosmo potentially, but mostly to copy the Devil Dinosaur, and then of course the Darkhawk. Definitely less RSM this week, so I think Darkhawk might start to go down in stock a little bit. It'll still be good as a dedicated build-around card, but it might be a little bit less ubiquitous that we just see it in every single Loki list. And then rounding out the top 4, I will browse through the whole top 16 as well as the whole metagame breakdown, but just to look at the last list here, we have got a Shuri Nimrod flavor of Phoenix Force, with the only Loki support being that Snowguard, and then Arnim Zola at the top of the curve, which I think is a really cool card to play, especially in these Nimrod lists, but even in the Human Torch lists, I think that Arnim Zola is, it probably makes the most sense in the list with Nimrod, but once you are doing that, it is just so much better than the Living Tribunal and just allows you to go that much more over the top. So next, I wanted to look at the tournament as a whole, and you can find a link to this spreadsheet in the video description if you want to go through it yourself. I broke down the data in a variety of different ways, but this is all of the deck lists, and I ordered the top 16. So all of the first 16, or did I say 17? I meant to say 16, but you know, there's a row here for just the header. But the top 16, that is ordered in this spreadsheet, and then everything after that is alphabetical. But we can go over and we can see a breakdown, and you start to see a lot of Quinjets, and you start to see some other patterns. We've got multiple Human Torches, probably the most Phoenix Forces that we've ever seen, but a lot of these Phoenix Force lists tend to do pretty well as well. We see a few crack into the top 16, and then after that, a bunch of Loki lists, and we see both varieties here. If we go to the end, we can kind of see which ones have RSM. It's a little bit tough. We can control F RSM. Now we're actually only 3 in the top 16, which means we've got a lot of just Loki going on here. So let's see, that might be a better way to do it. How many of these are Loki in the top 16? Almost all of them. So yeah, an even bigger representation of Loki this week. We see 13 out of the top 16, pretty incredible numbers, and 27, over half of the tournament playing Loki as well. So if we go to this breakdown tab, we can see how many, just to go through what all these mean. So this is just how many of each card appeared in the tournament, how many of each card appeared in the top 8, and then the percentage of total decks. This is just a percentage of how many of the cards appeared in the top 16 decks. And then this is like a comparison. So we see that 62% of the decks were playing Loki, but 81% of the top 16 decks were playing Loki. So that means that Loki was actually better than it was represented by, because a higher percentage of them, top 16, like half the field played Loki, but almost the entire field, 80% of the field, 60% versus 80%, made the top 16. So still really, really good results by Loki. We don't always see that, but this is a fantastic number right here. Slightly better even for Snowguard, as not all of the Loki lists were playing Snowguard, and that basically is just saying that the traditional Loki lists, which are mostly going to be Devil Dinosaur Loki lists, and the Phoenix Force ones. So Snowguard's an interesting card. We'll look at, actually, yeah, let's just jump right into the Loki breakdown, because that's what I'm talking about. So of the 27 Loki decks, 11 of them include Devil Dinosaur. 9 of them include Arishem, and then 5 of them include Phoenix Force. So those are basically the 3 different archetypes that you'll wind up seeing of Loki. And then there were 2 stragglers. These were both traditional Loki lists, non-Arishem lists, but one played Agent 13, Valentina, no Devil Dinosaur, and one played Sarah, I think Darkhawk, and then just some other tech cards, and again, no Devil Dinosaur. But most players on the 11 of the 13 players playing non-Arishem, non-Phoenix Force Loki opted for Devil Dinosaur this week. So that was really interesting. But Snowguard, definitely the best performer among the different Loki lists, and Snowguard is basically taking the Devil Dinosaur decks and taking the Phoenix Force decks, the 11 plus 5 there, and both of them are playing Snowguard because that's just a fantastic card. And Arishem didn't actually do too hot. A lot of people complaining or talking about Arishem right now. People complain about whatever they want to. I think that probably more people recognize that Loki is probably the problem. Hasn't been talked about in a while, as far as the devs didn't see any discussion from it today from the OTA. So that is possibly where we want to look at if we're looking to make some changes. And is there anything else interesting worth looking at in this Loki data? I don't think so, really. But you can browse through this. We've got some Gwen pools, some Shadow Kings, Dr. Octopus making its way. We'll actually look at the just RSM data in just a moment as well. High Evo, only seeing one of those. That is also in an RSM. And I don't remember where that Agatha came from. Oh, that Agatha, that was also an RSM list. So some people doing some silly things maybe with RSM a little bit, though actually the High Evo, don't want to just write it off just this second. The best performing RSM list, if you're looking at the top 16, I don't believe it top 8'd. I think it just made it into the top 16, but oh no, there were 2 of them. Right, of the 3 RSM lists that top 16'd, 2 of them were playing High Evo. Now, what that really speaks to is how low-key of a metagame we have right now, and so playing High Evo, which is cards that aren't great when Loki steals them, both because they don't get to steal the High Evo abilities, but also we have Cyclops and Sunspot and Misty Knight, which are down here at slightly worse performances. These are cards that also trigger, and Adam Warlock. These are all cards that trigger on a per turn basis. So again, just like Thena, those are going to be good cards against Loki decks specifically. So that is all definitely worth keeping in mind. The rest of this looks pretty straightforward. 4 leeches, 3 Dr. Octopuses actually. None of those actually making it into the top 16 right now, but we will look at an RSM list in just a moment that does include them. I did want to just look at the overall breakdown for a moment too. And you'll see I've got some cards highlighted as we kind of go through. I figured I'd talk a little bit about the nerfs and buffs that we just got in the OTA. So Mockingbird is a card that I have been saying since it was previewed, since the season video came out where we saw what Mockingbird was going to be. I actually said, I believe I said in my initial review, like, pick up Mockingbird. It is an insane card. It is like way too good. The only reason not to get Mockingbird is they're going to nerf it. And they did eventually nerf it 6 months later or something. So you definitely got your keys worth for Mockingbird. And honestly, I do not think that this nerf is a killer. I'll go over the nerfs quickly. I'm not going to throw them up on screen or anything. But Mockingbird went from a 5/9 up to a 6/10. Definitely a little bit worse because you'll be able to play it for free a little bit less often. But this is a really welcome change for Mockingbird, and it does make some of my Scar, Sasquatch, Mockingbird decks a little bit more consistent, which I think is interesting at the very least. But Mockingbird was really powerful, is still going to be really powerful though, I think. I don't think that that is going to throw it off its game too much. Anything else worth talking about here? Shang-Chi always has a negative shift right here. So funny, despite being such a played card. Where's Mobius come in? Okay, Mobius comes in right here with 11 copies, same as Devil Dinosaur. I don't think every Loki player was playing Mobius, but it is really, really good when this many people are playing Loki. 27 out of the 44. Blob is up next, and you'll see I have Blob highlighted in green. So in the OTA, they say Blob's changes, it no longer has an ongoing ability. So it can't be copied by Mystique. But let's go over to these RSM lists. We see that almost everyone is playing Blob except for maybe that one silly Agatha player. And how many of these people are playing Mystique? Let's just control F it here. Mystique, okay, 5. Half of them. But I mean, Blob actually does do poorly, I guess, because okay, one of the players not playing Blob actually made it into the top 16. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I'll reserve my judgment there then. But yeah, Mystique really not doing it, and I just think it's a trap. I think that it's interesting that Mystique and Absorbing Man can copy the Blob and also do other things like copy Darkhawks in mirrors, but I mostly think that that wasn't something that you wanted to be doing. But what's interesting is Rogue has been a really great tech card against Darkhawk, but also against Blob. Being able to blob yourself for only 3 energy makes it kind of a risk to play Blob early in a way that, like, Shang-Chi is 2, but Rogue just gives you like another angle to attack blobs for even less energy, which is a big deal. And I think removing this ongoing ability from Blob makes it a buff. So I'm kind of curious to see how this is going to play out. I think that we might start to see a little bit less Rogue, and we'll see in the number 1 deck they have moved away from Rogue. But I think that this is kind of a bluff or a buff to Blob. So I'm curious to see where RSM is going to go from here. What else do we have? We've got 6 Phoenix Force decks, looks like a few Destroy decks, and a Human Torch seeing some play as well. So I'm not sure if there was a move deck. Anything else interesting? I guess let's do a sort by... No, let's just keep it like this, and then I'll sort by shift in just a moment, too. Anything else interesting coming up here? Doesn't look like anything too crazy. Oh, yeah, some Silver Surfers did well last week. None did well this week, though. So nothing really to talk about there. And then, yeah, looks like some Destroy and 1 move deck ultimately snuck in there somewhere. Let me just sort by shift and just take a look at kind of winners and losers and trends here, see if there's anything. Wow, Juggernaut in the winning deck. So that's definitely going to get Juggernaut some points. But yeah, Juggernaut potentially a sleeper. I believe that Juggernaut top 4'd at least last week or within the past 2 weeks as well. Cable rising, being a good card, and I do think that Cable is really strong. I think I put out a short on Cable within the past 2 days. Cable's going to get better as those RSM numbers start to shrink to more reasonable things again. But yeah, Cable definitely putting up some good work here. I think this is like the biggest story, even though it didn't win. 11 copies of Devil Dinosaur, everybody trying to copy its success last week, is pretty fantastic. And I think that's really all. Let's scroll down to the bottom here. Oops, that's way too far to the bottom. And let's just look at some of these losers. And yeah, Shang-Chi, we already talked about. Mockingbird, actually a little bit of a loser too. RSM, loser. And then we have Absorbing Man, Blob. Oh, I did not fill out these things. There was 1 copy of Makari, no Ajax this week, and yeah, that's to be expected. Ajax is definitely not good. Did a short about that yesterday too. Dr. Octopus, actually the biggest loser, 7 copies. I was just looking at the RSM data at first, but 7 copies of Doc Ock, 6 copies of Goliath. All right, I think it's time to move on to the number 1 deck on the ladder, because it includes both of those cards. So I don't want to... I feel like we have to talk about both of those cards here. This is the number 1 deck in the world on the global leaderboard from Desperate Jill. You can see their name up here if you'd like to give them a follow on X. And it is RSM with a little bit more tech, and this is actually where sort of I've been thinking to go with RSM. Specifically, as the RSM numbers go down, it's going to be less important to play Darkhawk in your own RSM lists, and it's also kind of going to be less important to play Rogue. I do still think that Rogue has some merit, specifically because you can Rogue plus Shang-Chi on turn 6 with that extra RSM energy, but you can't Shang-Chi plus Enchantress, so there definitely is still a reason to include Rogue. But here's what I really like about the deck: Leech and Dr. Octopus. I've been playing a ton of Leech in RSM. It is way too good to be able to Leech on turn 4, and I talked with one of my buddies who's currently in the I think he's a top 50 player right now playing Phoenix Force, and basically he said, like, I'm just worried about the Leech and the Dr. Octopus when I see an RSM on the other side of the field. Being able to play either of these two cards on turn 4 is just game winning, so I definitely think that Jill is onto something here with just playing both of those in there and cutting the Darkhawk, which is still really good in the mirror, but the mirror's kind of dwindling, and you gotta play for the people. Like, you gotta play for your own metagame. If you are still seeing, which chances are, like, you might be, depending on where you're at on the ladder, you might see more RSM than you see Phoenix Force, right? But at the top, you might want to prepare for specifically what you're playing against, and that is where Leech and Dr. Octopus are going to come in. So Alioth is the 6-drop of choice, and you can see I reached out and just said, have you tried Arnim Zola? Which they responded no. And I've been playing this. I think that this video it's too long already that I'm not going to include any gameplay, but I've been playing with this list just to try it out, as opposed to the list that I had been playing, which subs Enchantress, Doc Ock, and Alioth for Rogue, Darkhawk, Arnim Zola. And I think I still like the Arnim Zola above Alioth, but they are kind of a similar role in that you want to have priority, and then you want to do something to press your advantage on the final turn. I will say Alioth in conjunction with Dr. Octopus is very good, because you either win the location with Dr. Octopus, or at the very least you lock your opponent out of a location with Dr. Octopus, which, if you have priority going into the final turn, just makes it more easy for you to nail the 50-50 with Alioth, rather than having to nail a 1 in 3 to hit whatever relevant cards your opponent is trying to play. So I do think that Alioth is really good alongside Dr. Octopus, and we'll see, but I am definitely missing Arnim Zola. And yeah, I'll probably have a video out, I don't know, maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'll like break it up into shorts or something, but it's just to say, like, it's a bunch of videos of me playing RSM, playing this list, and winning games with Rogue and Arnim Zola still, because RSM just gives me them randomly, and Nick Fury gave me the Arnim Zola randomly one game, and those are the ways that I'm like getting my best wins still. So it's funny, maybe I just have a fondness for those cards. Quick little update I wanted to throw into the middle of this video, but there was actually another player that just posted that they got top 1 in the world on the Infinite Leaderboard, and they were also playing RSM, a very, very similar list. You can see their win rate in games right here, but the actual list is very, very close, cutting Alioth for Rogue, which I did think was possibly the weakest card from the list that we just looked at. Now you can play Rogue plus Shang-Chi on the final turn, or Rogue plus Enchantress if ongoing abilities have really got you down. But they do stress that the where is it here? Oh yeah, turn 4 Leech or turn 4 Doc Ock. Both are really good plays, but they do give a slight nod to Leech. It does depend on what you're playing, and if you're playing in Conquest, then you can make that decision based off what your opponent's got going on, but wanted to show off this deck list and player as well. Werewolf by Night getting an additional point. We can see Werewolf by Night not really getting too much play in here. But I think, so most of the Loki lists, especially in tournaments, opt for tech as opposed to trying to put more power on the board. But we did see a lot of them, if we go to the Loki breakdown, a lot of them are also still running Darkhawk. 16 of them are running Darkhawk. As the RSM numbers continue to dwindle, and some of these players are also running Rock Slide. Oh, actually only one. One player was running Rock Slide in their Loki list, but as the RSM numbers dwindle, less players will want Darkhawk, less players will just be able to play Darkhawk in their Loki lists. A lot of these Darkhawk players are RSM players themselves, but you'll be looking for other ways to add a bunch of power, and Werewolf is actually really good in a lot of the Loki shells. All of your Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cards are on reveal, so they're really good with Werewolf. And with just one more power on it, I think we could see Werewolf sneak its way back into some Loki lists. I do think that Werewolf is really good. We also see an additional point on Hitmonkey. This was supposed to go on Hitmonkey, not on Swarm. And that is an interesting one, because that is not something that has really made its way into tournaments in a little bit. So I'm not sure on Hitmonkey. I don't think that I'll talk about Sauron in a minute. Oh, that's wrong too. Sorry, I don't know how these things got moved around, but I'll have to remember what that is, or I'll pull it up on the other monitor here. Hydra Bob, similar to Hitmonkey, I don't think that is going to make a huge impact, but I do think Sauron could. It's not a huge change. 3-3 to 3-4. And I'll say, I do think that this is a huge impact for Hydra Bob. Now, if you want to play a bunch of one-cost cards, this is going to be definitely one of the one-cost cards that you play. It's just not typically what we see in tournaments. And one thing, I do think Hydra Bob is really interesting. I talked about it in my season review, so check that out if you want like more insight on Hydra Bob, because he has a hidden drawback that I don't think a lot of people realize, in that it impacts your ability to fully utilize the snap mechanic. Now, that does have some impacts on your opponent as well, but it mostly impacts you as the Hydra Bob player, because you need to be able to like bob, snap, and move it out of your Angela lane and into your Craven lane, weird things like that. So the fact that it makes your snap worse, I think, probably makes it significantly worse for Conquest, which is so much more snap reliant than just like the win rate of a deck. So I think that Hydra Bob is probably still going to sit on the sidelines in tournaments. Sauron, the reason that I say that that is actually a relevant buff is Sauron is like just barely on the fringe of seeing play in some of these tournaments. We will see huge droughts of Shuri Sauron lists, and then like one player plays it and they top 8 or top 4. So the deck is good when people decide to play it, just nobody's really deciding to play it in favor of more interactive and other stuff that goes higher. I do think that Shuri Sauron could use a little bit more help than this, but it's a nice start. And this, well, actually, let me double check, because I think, oh yeah, one of the things in red, no, okay, so this is not the biggest card in the current OTA. I'm gonna get to that. Yeah, sure, I'll get to that next. I think this is a pretty cool change to Lockjaw though, super excited about that. And yeah, interestingly, like two decks that are getting buffed, or two cards that are getting buffed are Lockjaw and then Hydra Bob. Both of those can be shells for Hitmonkey, so maybe that could be interesting just for Hitmonkey in general. What's weird here is now there is no way to not Lockjaw into a Lockjaw location, so you are committing to that location just being full random, but I like full random. Live by the random, die by the random is always fun. So one card that got nerfed was one of the first cards we looked at in this video, Ravonna, getting nerfed down to a 2/2. The fact that it won this tournament does make me think, okay, yeah, there's maybe something to that. Ravonna could lose a power. It is like very strange to me that like Zabu was obviously the best card in the game for a while, and then they're like, okay, let's just make this the new Zabu. And I don't know. It just seems wrong for this ability to be so strong. So yeah, it can lose a point of power. I think that's fine. I still think that Ravonna seems to maybe be like against some stated goals that they have, but we'll see. And interestingly, so I think that one like secret kind of really fun home for Ravonna has been Cerebro 3, but now it could maybe make its way into Cerebro 2. That's kind of interesting. I don't like Cerebro 2 nearly as much, but there's some cool things that you can do with a Cerebro 2 list too, and maybe now Cerebro 2 looks at Iron Man? Probably not. Oh, Cerebro 2 plays the Goblin. Cerebro 2 plays Green Goblin and Hobgoblin, and can now play Ravonna alongside that. I mean, it doesn't always play the Goblins, but now it definitely does. Ooh, you play Cerebro 2 and it's a junk deck. You play White Widow, you play Storm, you play Goose, you play both of the Goblins, you play Cerebro, Ravonna. You need like 4 more cards? Let me know what those are down in the comments, how you would fill out that Cerebro 2 list, but that seems really good. So maybe Ravonna, I don't know, I won't say it got buffed, but it definitely has some interesting utility in that deck now as well. And then the other 2 changes that we saw, no, there's only one more change, and I am leaving it here for the end, but I actually think it might be the biggest buff with this patch, and it's Viper. I don't know how that got onto Swarm, but it's Viper. Now Viper has a really interesting way to use its ability. So one of your other cards here switches sides became one of your other cards here with the lowest power switches sides, which basically just means you have a lot more flexibility in Viper. You don't have to play it on turn 3. You can play it on like turn 5, maybe turn 6, but at that point, it's going to be more likely that your opponent has filled up that location. So you're probably still going to want to turn 4 or turn 5 your Viper, but now it's also much less telegraphed. You can lead with like White Widow into a location, and then you can play Hood plus Viper in that same location on turn 4, and just overall is going to give you a lot more flexibility, and I think it's going to be really good. Viper was at one point a very, very good card, and then they nerfed it because of Havoc, and it kind of like had to answer for Havoc's sins there, which it would have been way too annoying having Havoc on 2 and then Viper on 2 as well, and being able to combo with those, because Havoc on 2 you can't play Viper on turn 3, but you could if Viper only costs 2. So all of that is to say, I think this will be a nice little resurgence for Viper, and I think it secretly just gives it a lot more flexibility, but I am also excited about Lockjaw, and excited. I mean, it's a blob buff too, if we're being honest. And now that I've talked through it here a little bit, I'm also a little bit excited for the Ravonna side grade, we'll call it. But for today, I'm going to call it there. That is going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching, and don't forget, if you're already watching this far in the video, I'm sure you're subscribed already, but if not, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment, and you'll be entered into a giveaway to win a season pass, premium mystery variants, or some credits. But that's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.